what does it mean to have a healthy relationship with social media and our devices? It has come up a lot in conversations about my research when I visited college campuses. And it actually, one of the students once who attended my lectures, one of the first lectures I think that I did on this research, I was at Drew University in New Jersey, and we were talking about the findings of my study, and one student during the Q&A asked, what if you think that there is no such thing as a healthy relationship with social media and smartphones? Like, what if you're one of those people? And there were a lot of Res Life people in the back, and they were like, uh-oh. And there was all these people nodding their heads. And it was interesting to just have that question raised, because I've always phrased it as this, like, what is it, like, let's think about what would a healthy relationship look like? I'm gonna assume everyone in here, we probably have an unhealthy relationship with social media and our devices. I think that's kind of the norm at this point. But the idea of somehow sort of being in the world that we're in right now and then asking that question, what if you think there is no healthy relationship, I think is very daunting. So hold that in your heads as we talk tonight, because we're gonna make a little bit of a shift too. So I want us to think about sacred space tonight. And in the vein of creating sacred space, or just really sort of being present in the room. So I'll introduce you to my phone. This is my phone. It's a dumb phone. I brought it as a show and tell. So I've never had a smartphone, and my plan is to never have one. And we'll see. I'm waiting for the day when I can't get on an airplane because I don't have a smartphone. And I'm the only one now who's printed out her ticket. And I learned in LA recently that it's impossible to get around without Uber. And then if you don't have there's no taxis. And I didn't know that actually until I got there recently, and then I couldn't get anywhere. So, and I had to have people, I was taking the bus. I figured out how to take the bus to different places, and it was all very challenging. So anyway, I can't live in LA apparently if, I guess maybe I would have a car. Anyway, so what I would like you all to do, if you haven't done this already, is just, put your phone away. Like just let's commit to being in the room together and not being on the phone. So if your phone is out, if you're holding it in your hand like it's your precious, just put it in your bag, or just like commit to not looking at it. We're just gonna be in this space together. So I really love the idea of sacred space. When I was in graduate school, it was one of my favorite concepts that I learned about. So, and I read all of Mircea Eliade's work because I was really obsessed with his work. He talks about the sacred and the profane, and I was just fascinated by it. And so I thought it would be good for us to call up the idea of sacred space in this room. So just to give you an idea, so Mircea Eliade, the religion scholar, he talked about how the experience of sacred space makes possible the founding of the world. I love that idea. Where the sacred manifests itself in space, the real unveils itself. The world comes into existence. So the idea that we are carving out spaces, I like this idea when I was in graduate school that, if you just take the idea of a church, like somehow outside the church, you're not in a sacred space, but then you walk in the church and suddenly you're in a sacred space. And so that's sort of an easy way of thinking about it. But we have all kinds of sacred spaces that we create in our lives. Or I worry that we're not creating sacred spaces as much as we used to, because our technology, our devices, they're kind of everywhere. We bring them everywhere, and so suddenly we don't have this space. We even bring them to church. One of the things that was really interesting when I was doing my research with students on campus, so I traveled all around the country, I talked to college students all over the nation about their relationship with their smartphones and social media, and so church, synagogue, et cetera, came up a lot. In the conversations in one of two ways. It came up as one of the reasons why I like to go to church, synagogue, whatever location you would attend for worship, is because I don't feel right bringing my phone in. And so it's my 1 hour a week when I don't have it. So it came up in that regard. Or it came up as in this way. I can't even, like, I'm so attached to my phone, I check it in church. So there was a sense of guilt attached to it. So, but generally, we're bringing our phones everywhere. And if the idea is that a space is sacred where maybe we don't want to be interrupted in it, we want to sort of carve out the space as something other than our normal everyday life, our devices, if we're constantly being interrupted, et cetera, if they're constantly calling on our attention, the idea of the sacred space, I think, would fall apart for him. And so for another concept from Mircea Eliade that I love is just this idea of a hierophany, which is a manifestation of the sacred, and it breaks and organizes our space. And I wanted to bring that up because I think part of what's happening in our world with technology is we're no longer organizing our space in the sense that we're always bringing these devices everywhere, and so all space becomes the same. And to give you an idea, I'm staying at the very beautiful hotel across the street, the La Estancia La Jolla, and they're planning a wedding. I think they're having a wedding there this weekend. It's very, very beautiful. And I was walking around, and there's a really beautiful pool area, and I put on a big sweater. And I went and I sat over there, and was kind of hanging out by the pool. And one of the things I noticed was just, everyone is by the pool, and they're all on their phones and laptops too. And I thought, or maybe you guys can think about this. Often now, vacation is not even a sacred space, because there's Wi-Fi everywhere, right? There's even Wi-Fi on the beach in places. So you've always got it. And now, of course, with smartphones, I remember when it was really expensive to use the internet before there was data. And but now everybody's got unlimited data. I know my husband's got unlimited data. And so we can use it all the time. And so even when we're at the beach, even when we're on vacation, we're constantly working or we're constantly scrolling. So one of the findings from my research with students on campus is this one. So 69% of students, so a lot of students, said they believe that smartphones have created the expectation that we must be on and available, usually immediately available, both day and night, even while we are sleeping. And I wonder if I asked that question today, if the number would go up. I wonder how many of you in this room feel like you need to be available when you're sleeping. So, or if you turn off your phone at night, or if you put it away somewhere. And I wanted to put this little ditty down here while we're talking about it. Did you know that Netflix sees its biggest competitor as sleep? So I'm not kidding about that. They are competing with our sleep. And I remember when I'm going to talk about a course I taught about smartphones and social media with college students, and one of the things we discussed in the course was autoplay. Autoplay. You're watching a new series on Netflix. You finish the episode, and then Netflix immediately queues up the next one and plays it. And my students were like, yeah, they were like, it's because Netflix is trying to help us. And I'm like, no, it's because Netflix doesn't want you to go to sleep, have sex, talk to the person next to you. They just want your eyeballs. And so that's what that's about. They're not doing this to be nice to you. They're doing this because this is how they make money. And so they're competing with your actual physical bodily needs. So I feel like we have to let's just let that sink in for a second. Netflix sees its competition as our actual physical health and well-being, our bodily needs. But a lot of students in this question, they talked about how we are all living like brain surgeons. We're all living like surgeons, or maybe At someone who has to be on call all the time in an emergency. So we're living in a state of emergency, but that's become the norm. So there's this constant competition for our attention. So this is creating a power imbalance, and I want us to think about that for a minute. One of the things that came up a lot in my interviews with students was people said in different ways, basically this idea. That we're supposed to be using our devices, right? They're supposed to be useful to us. We're supposed to be using them. However, people feel used by them. And students talked a lot about how they can't make the shift go in the direction they want to. They want to be users of social media and their smartphones, but they don't feel like users. They feel like they're being used by them. And some students talked about how it's kind of just like this tidal wave that just crashes over them. And they love their phones, they hate their phones. So it's a love-hate relationship. It's like a bad marriage. so because I remember there was like some students had named their phones and they were like, Meg and me, like we go everywhere together. And I remember one guy told me that he said going out without his phone was like going out without his heart or his brain. And another young man told me that one of his favorite things was about how if his because he always had a smartphone with him, that he could always see how good he looked. Like he liked to turn the selfie camera around and just be like, look at me, I'm so attractive. So there were things that the students really loved about their smartphones, but then they also loathed their smartphones. They hated their smartphones, but the thing that they hated the most was this sense of, I feel helpless in the face of my technology. So I can't stop using it. Like I can't get out from under it. So, which brings us to technology and addiction. And so if you didn't know this already, smartphones, social media, all of the apps that are on our phones, they are actually designed to addict us. So, and Tristan Harris, if you go to his website, he's a former Google exec, and he has this whole program for humane technology, et cetera, but he specifically talks about how they are designed to addict us. And in fact, the theory used to design how the apps work and how your smartphone works is the same as slot machines. So slot machines, you know how this works, right? They're designed with all the bells and the whistles, et cetera, and the exciting, noises, and then you pull the lever, it's interactive, and then money comes out, sometimes just a few quarters or whatever, but then, you keep playing, and they want you to stay. So that's the whole idea. And of course, I don't think we normally think of, casinos as organizations that are there to do the public good, right? So we think of them as, these places where a lot of people lose their homes, or the addiction flourishes. And sure, it can be fun for a few of us, but it destroys lives and families and people, right? So they're not exactly like bastions of goodness, because we also know that the games themselves are designed, right? They're designed to keep us there. They're designed that, they don't have windows. So that's why there's no windows, because they don't want you to see the outside. And if you think about that, think about how people who are working at all these companies, they're taking those same theories and they're using them to design the thing that you're carrying everywhere. And all those bells and whistles, even just the slightest, the timing of notifications, the ways they show up for you, it's all designed to keep your eyeballs there. And so it's almost like, if you think about how the casinos and there's no windows, the idea, think about the phone, it's like they don't want you to notice anything around you. They just want you to be like this the whole time. So it's almost like, shutting all the windows for you on the world, just so that you're right here. So So know that if you feel addicted to your phone, if you have a hard time putting it down, it's not your fault. So you should forgive yourself. But I think we should think about the fact that we are all walking around with slot machines, right? We're all playing slot machines all day. I wanted us to think a little bit about who's creating this world. There's a way in which we're doing it, right? We're capitulating, like we're doing these things. We're bringing our phones everywhere. We're updating them, et cetera. Or are we? Like, who is creating this world? Or who has recreated this world for us? And I have begun to think of the fact that there is a new set of gods in our world, right? And one of the big ones is Mark Zuckerberg. And another one is now like Elon Musk. So think about the people who are designing these things. Think about the fact that Mark Zuckerberg designed Facebook out of revenge. Like, think about the priorities that they have, right? Like, why are we creating these things? How are they affecting our world? Who is who is pulling the strings here? And how is it affecting our ability to control our own lives, to make decisions for ourselves? We have a very, very small group of people who are having a shocking effect on the world. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg Elon Musk, they're like more powerful than the president of the United States. I mean, that they're actually affecting the global community. And I think we have to really think about that. We haven't really spent much time thinking about ethics here. I think we're starting to now because of everything that's happening with politics and the idea of the truth and propaganda and the way it's infiltrating our world. But we're really late to the party in terms of thinking about, like, what is going on here? Is this good? Or is this not a net good? Like, where is the balance here? Is it tilting toward the positive or is it tilting toward the negative? So where is the room for our humanity, for the sacredness of it and its limits? And I wanted to bring up this word, limits, and the idea of limitation, right? So we are limited. Our humanity makes us limited. There are certain things I can't do, or like I'm not a machine. Like, I am just not a machine. I'm not a machine. I can't, my friend can't respond to 5,000 emails a week. Like, we just can't do that without cracking up, right? So we are not machines. We have limits. And I think part of what is going on is we're pushing our limits, right? We're living as though we are surgeons. We are all surgeons. 24/7, we've got to be available. 24/7, we've got to be, responding to people's texts. And, a lot of students today will tell you about how they feel like if a text comes in, they have to respond immediately, especially if it's to do with work. But also for their friends. Like, there's this sense of, and my students for that experiment, they had to warn all their friends, if you text me, I'm not going to text you back because I'm not going to have my phone for a week. So there's this sense of, we've got to set this up. We've got to make sure we've got to get out ahead of the fact that people are going to be angry at us for being limited for this week. And I've learned, just without a smartphone, that now whenever I travel, unless it's to go see somebody who knows me and knows I don't have a smartphone, I have to get out ahead of it. I have to tell people, as I did with Maureen when we were setting up, like, oh, hi, like, just so you know, I don't have a smartphone, so I won't be able to get email, like, when I'm on the train, because people will just assume you can be accessible in every which way. And so I have to be like, if you really need me, you have to call my phone, or you can text me. But, like, I'm not, all my friends know that I'm not a texter. So I have to get out ahead of it. So we have limits, and we're pushing ourselves beyond our limits. And I wonder, do we need to reckon a little bit with our limits at this point? Do we need to celebrate the fact that we're limited and the fact that we are not machines, that it's okay for us to have limits, like that we have to start, drawing some lines? One of the things I think we need to do is think about, what does it mean to become a critical thinker about our devices? I don't think we've done this yet, really. Really thought about, what does it mean to be a decision maker in relation to our devices? So, for example, I always tell my students, some of them will give their phones away to their roommates to get a paper done, and then they feel bad about themselves because they're like, I don't have any willpower. And I'm like, no, that's your willpower. Like, you gave your phone to your roommate and you said, don't give this back to me until I'm done with my paper. And, we have to really make decisions around our devices as opposed to just let it be a wave. We have to think about what is going on. Like, we have to think about, do we want Mark Zuckerberg to have so much power over our entire world? And if not, what do we do? Like, what do we do? Like, how do we deal with this? What do we think about the fact that, like, let's think about the fact that we have little slot machines in our hands. Like, what do we think about that? Like, is that something that we're okay with? What are ways we can mitigate those kinds of things? Like, how can we become users of these devices as opposed to being used by them? And, my students talked a lot after this experiment that we did about how much they enjoyed their life without their phone. But their mother would never let them have a dumb phone, because they used to joke about my phone all the time, because I just use this to tell the time, and that's pretty much all it does. And they would ask me things like, Professor Freitas, what do you do when you're waiting in line if you don't have a phone? And I'm like, I just look around. And they're like, that's creepy, right? And I was like, oh, okay. They're like, it's kind of creepy that you just like stare at people. So they have all kinds of excuses. We've all got excuses about why we need the phone, right? We've decided it's safer. It's safer if we have the phones, and so therefore, we're giving our whole lives to Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Google, essentially. So we're coming up with excuses to not be critical thinkers. We're coming up with excuses to not choose, but to just sort of have all this stuff coming at us. And so I think we need to get a handle on this, and I think we need to do some thinking, and we need to start becoming decision makers about this. One of the things that I've thought a lot about is this idea of digital architecture, and I talk a lot about this at universities, because also universities, which, we're at a huge university, right? There's a gazillion buildings, and Wi-Fi reaches every corner of this campus, right? I'm just gonna guess. That's a decision the university has made. It's not necessarily helpful to the students. So one of the things that students talk a lot about when I was doing the research for this was they were fantasizing about things that could happen that would be really nice. About, say, for example, having a Wi-Fi free cafeteria on campus. Like, so you're on a campus, there's like 10 cafeterias. Like I bet this campus has a lot of cafeterias because there's so many students, right? Let's just guess there's 10 cafeterias or 10 places to eat. Maybe one of them could be Wi-Fi free. Maybe one of them, you have to lock up your phone on the way in, or you're not allowed to have your smartphone out, or something like that. Maybe one floor in a hall could be digital free. Maybe one classroom or two would be digital free. Like, we are making decisions to just let it all in without thinking about it. We're making sure Wi-Fi reaches every single corner of our universe, even the beach in some places. We're not necessarily thinking about, how do we want to structure our spaces? Are there spaces where we're not going to allow devices to be? And are there going to be classrooms that are just going to be technology free? Are there going to be floors or lounges in a residence hall that is technology free because it's for socializing? Are we going to get people thinking about these things? And whenever I talk about this at schools, people are like, what? We can control our spaces. So there's this sense of it's just never occurred to us that we could make these decisions. And one of the things I think is interesting is whenever people start thinking about it, I'm like, what about in your student center? Is there a space that you could block the Wi-Fi? Could you get the engineering students to come up with some sort of fun device? Have a contest, how we can turn off the Wi-Fi over here, how we can jam it so you can't use your data. And then people are like, oh yeah, and then we could have hammocks, and people start thinking when they think about populating the space or designing it, suddenly they're talking about pillows and hammocks and cozy nooks where people can talk. And so I think that tells you a lot about what we think of when we're free of technology. We think of rest, we think of enjoyment. And when we think of technology being in our space, we think of work. Work, access, and all of these things are stressful. So the last thing I'll say is about spiritual practices and traditions. And so we started with sacred space. I want to come back to this idea at the end and point some things out. So I grew up Catholic, and the Catholic Church, it just really makes me mad sometimes. And one of the things that really makes me mad is how slow it can be to respond to culture in our world. But here is one of the places that my tradition is just about as contemporary as it gets, like just on the edge of just forward thinking and just really transformational, which is the spiritual traditions that I grew up with. They're all traditions that help us carve out space to think, to be quiet, to not be accessed, to slow us down, to press pause. What do? We go on retreats. Sometimes we go on silent retreats. Or we go into a sanctuary. We go into a church. And ideally, you don't touch your phone in the church, right? You allow that 1 hour to be a space where you're just going to sit and listen and be with the people around you, like really be with them, like be fully open to them. I think one of the things my students talk all about is this idea of willpower. I would say a lot of us, and that they don't have it. They don't have it in relation to their devices. I think we need to practice more forgiveness with ourselves, because there's a reason why we can't put our phones down. They're designed that way. And so we have to become aware of that and not be so hard on ourselves about the fact that it's hard for us to negotiate our devices. So I think the challenge of when we press pause, when we slow down, is what happens afterwards when we do. And I'll just tell you, my literary agent, she went away for 2 weeks at the end of August. Her son got married. They had all sorts of family things, and she really just unplugged for 2 weeks. She didn't respond to emails. And the first day she came back, she called me, and she was like, I don't know what's worse, never having a vacation or coming back from vacation. And I keep thinking about that. So I don't think we can keep going this way. And while religions have myriad problems and issues, oh, let me count the ways. Spiritual practices across traditions have so much to offer us, so many practical frameworks for us to call upon, to begin to navigate the world we live in now, technology and all it has brought to us, in a way that reminds us about our humanity, its limits and its beauty, so that we can experience simple pleasures like that of focus, concentration, the reading of a book, the connection that is so all-encompassing that we forget everything else but the person right in front of us in a moment of true intimacy. And suddenly we remember why the world is a beautiful place to be. I want that for all of us. Let's not lose it. Thank you.